You're listening to the 54665, all things rural economic development, all things small towns, and all things Viroqua. We have with us today a very special guest, a guest who's definitely helped me out personally in my business endeavors quite a bit. Ms. Joy Vietinghoff of Accounting and Tax Service here in Viroqua. Good morning, Joy.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hi, Joy.
Hi, Nora.
Am I asking the first question? It got way too quiet.
I know, it's good. The pregnant pause. We just built a lot of suspense there for
We
listeners.
did.
Yeah, exactly.
Or we just looked like total amateurs.
No, it's fine.
So, Joy, how long have you owned Accounting and Tax Service?
Oh, we've been here 20 years. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year. Relocated here from Northern Illinois. I hate to say that.
Oh, that's okay.
And didn't want to commute to La Crosse, so I opened an accounting practice. And this community has been so welcoming. I'm still here 20 years later.
Nice.
Wonderful.
It's just amazing. That's so great. How many people do you serve currently?
Last year, we did over 700 tax returns.
Wow.
And we have about 70 clients, ongoing accounting clients. So we're a small office.
Sure.
And we try to tailor our services to small businesses and individualize it so that they get exactly what they need and no more.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So, one of the things I think one of the best pieces of advice that I was ever given by Sue Noble, when I was talking about the business plans for the restaurant, she said, you need to get three things. You need to get an attorney, you need to get a banker, and you need to get an accountant. And this was as we were going through the first steps to planning the business. Okay, is there any advice that you can give people for like best practices? If we're in the process of, I have this dream for a business or I have this idea, what can you put out there
To help others.
Yeah.
I'd say Sue was right on track
Okay.
to find those three professionals to start with. And from the accounting side, it is important to meet with a professional to figure out what type of business you want to be, a sole proprietor, a corporation, a partnership. What kind of record keeping will you need? Can you do it yourself? Will you need help? It's so important once you get your dream started to keep records and be consistent. Keep them in a manner that allows you to look at numbers month to month, maybe year to year, so you can compare, am I doing better, am I doing worse?
Mm-hmm.
How are my costs looking? Are they rising? Do I need to adjust prices to stay profitable? And I would suggest really talk to a professional, meet with them, ask them what their services are, and tailor your bookkeeping to your specific needs. Sometimes I meet with a new client and they're kind of nervous and they're not sure what they should do. And I'll open up just a spreadsheet or a piece of paper and say, let's just list the type of expenses you have, the income. And if you can keep it on a paper and pencil, fine, do it. You don't have to have a sophisticated software system.
Sure.
Or maybe you're computer savvy and an Excel spreadsheet will work for you. It seems important that you choose something that works for you so that you will do the record keeping.
So, that's an interesting point because I think, so much, and this is just a perception. So, so much of like working through the IRS or the state tax system is, it's very formulaic, right? And it seems like there's very little room for, individual expression, so to speak. And I think that should be noted that's where accounting services really come in handy. If you do have a method of bookkeeping that works for your business specifically, using a tax professional like Joy or an accounting professional like Joy and her services really help make that translation. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. We can take what you know best and filter that with what the IRS rules are or the state rules and make sure that, you're not only figuring out your own profit and loss, but does it meet what the requirements are?
Yeah.
And, when you get into payroll and tax reporting, it's so specific. I mean, you miss a deadline by a day and you're going to pay a penalty and some interest, especially in payroll taxes.
Yeah.
We often find that our fees are much less than the penalties that are sometimes involved if you don't know what you're doing.
Fact.
I think we all know this around the table. And that's one of the reasons that services from a place like accounting and tax service are so important, whether you're a nonprofit or a small business.
So in 20 years of like, having your own shingle out, any estimation of how many times the tax laws have changed in those 20 years? Like if you had to throw a ballpark number.
Every year.
Every year,
They
right.
change every year. But the last tax act from 2017 was the biggest we've had.
Really?
Yeah, so looking to prepare 2018 returns is going to be much different.
I bet.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the, so, just for example, like keeping a QuickBooks file, doing things, being able to track, profit and losses and seeing where you're at, all your expenses are documented, which is really, really smart. You should do that or some version of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that ever-changing playing field of tax law, it's dense. It's really, really dense. And unless you have some sort of intuition as to like how the tax laws are shaping and morphing on a federal level or a state level, having a professional is so important. I think it's hands down one of the most important facets of our business that we do.
Of course, I'm an accounting professional, but I would agree with that because I love my job, and it's meeting new people, helping people, but solving a puzzle.
Sure.
The client comes in with all the puzzle pieces in their loose, and I get to put them in the prettiest picture that I can to not only keep them profitable, but keep on the right side of IRS, use those laws to their best advantage to get the best result.
Sure.
And it's fun and it's really important.
That's awesome. I think that there's an interesting point there. The right side of the IRS. So as a small business owner, one of my biggest fears, right? It's 5 letters. I never want to see that piece of mail. Audit. How afraid of the IRS should small business owners be, specifically if you're in, like, say, the first 5-year window of starting up your dream business or, really taking the bull by the horns?
Oh, I would say don't be afraid at all.
Great.
If you're doing the right thing, if you're reporting all of your income, that's a necessity. I mean, not reporting income can turn out really bad.
Sure.
But if we've got some expenses that are maybe a gray area, IRS is not going to take your firstborn.
Okay.
You may have an adjustment. You may owe a little more in income tax, but it's not the end of the world.
Great.
Certainly keeping receipts and having a good filing system helps.
Sure.
But the IRS, I don't think you need to be afraid of them.
Okay. Yeah, and this is I'm gonna keep mining into things that she said here, and this is all based on personal experience, how to not do this. But no, it's really not. I'm not that much of I'm not a nightmare client. I know that. I try. Nora's making the side eyes at me right now. For those of you who aren't here in the studio with us, she's literally
I can only imagine.
oh no, I'm not terrible. Receipts. You said something about receipts. Now, in the day and age that we live in, there's a tremendous amount of electronic transfers in and out, right?
Yes.
That's okay if I just give you my bank reconciliation, like these are all electronic transfers. This came out. That's all right?
That's an accountant's nightmare. It's really difficult in this changing technology world to capture the actual expense.
Okay.
Because you could do a debit from your bank account for my utilities.
Sure.
Unless the IRS can see the receipt, they don't know if you're paying your own bill or my bill. So in addition to the debits or the charges on the credit card and the monthly credit card statement, you must keep the receipts. So IRS can know that was your bona fide deduction.
Wow.
Yeah.
Paper receipts, still relevant. Write that down.
Yes. Or a snapshot, a picture of it, something so that IRS can read and see exactly what you bought.
Man, oh man. Okay. That's good to know.
Not fun.
Not fun. No,
But
really not
necessary.
fun. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's a system within the system. I mean, keeping track of those receipts, and like I just kind of jokingly pulled out here, and you can kind of hear me like, here's a receipt in my pocket. for some stuff that was purchased at a local grocery store. And, I got to make sure this gets in my file.
Yes, you do.
I was going to just hand it to Joy here in the office, but that would not be, that's not Gucci, as
We-
they say,
well, we
as
would-
the kids say.
That's what the kids say now. So what kind of file do you use, Luke? Like, do you have a big expandable file? Do you have just
Yeah, no, that's a good
an
question.
envelope? I think
No.
that's a reasonable question.
It is a reasonable question. So everything at the cafe is set up. It's set up alphabetically. Being a farm to table restaurant, we have a lot of purveyors, and to be fair, I've been audited, but not by the IRS. I was audited once by the health department. They wanted to see all the food that I had in house because we were getting a lot of press for being a farm to table restaurant and sourcing locally. So literally, I opened the file cabinet with all the receipts and all the invoices, and I said, "This is what I've got." And they went through it for about 3.5 hours, and they wanted to see where stuff was coming in, and it was coming out of Madison, and they were really kind about it. They were just doing their job. So what we do is we do an itemized report. So on this receipt here, we have a piece of paper, and it'll show that, okay, on this receipt, the lacinato kale for $2.99, definitely. This is for the restaurant. Hot cocoa.
Probably not.
Probably not, right? I had my son
It's
with
possible.
me. It's possible. Actually, there was one time, true story, when I had a customer say she wanted a hot cocoa and she was insistent about it, and I didn't have any in house, so I literally ran to the co-op and had them make one and then brought it back for her. That's hospitality.
Yep.
So what we'll do then is we actually write it down, document it, the date, the receipt number, and then we staple it to this expense report thing. And
Very good.
it is very good. It's one of those things that we've sifted and winnowed over the last 5 years, and hopefully that system works. But it's so important, and I will tell you that keeping receipts is it's a big part of my job.
It's also not fun.
No, it's not fun.
And there's new technology out there too.
Yeah,
You know,
talk
for
a
people
little
to
bit
look-
about that.
I wish I was more informed.
Okay.
But certainly there's apps out there for our mobile phones,
Yeah.
computers, taking a snapshot of it just to keep it organized so that, yes, you do have them. Doesn't necessarily have to be the accordion file.
Right. Right.
But again, whatever works best for you to do it.
Yeah. The other one that I want to say about that, tracking mileage, right? Small business owner.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to put in a shameless plug for an app that I use. It's called Mile IQ. And I think the subscription to it for me is like $24 a year. But every single drive that I make, it asks me to label it either personal or professional.
It's wonderful.
It
We
is.
recommend the same software.
Yep. And so it gives us that feedback, and at the end of the month, it lets me know what mileage reimbursement is. So there's no guesswork, basically. I can go through and categorize all my drives. I get email prompts, and then it automatically emails a PDF to me.
Well worth the investment in it. And again, being consistent and getting used to using it is
Yep.
so key, but
Yep.
necessary.
Definitely.
And you'll get a better result.
Yeah. Yeah. You know where you're at, for sure.
Otherwise, how many times do you get in your vehicle and just forget to write it down, and then
Right.
you don't get the
Right.
deduction?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
New tax laws, right? New tax laws and how they impact small business owners. How do you stay on top of this? Like, do you just read tax law day and night? I mean,
I'm not that boring. Oh, gosh. We go to a lot of classes, a lot of
Okay.
continuing ed, a lot of emails from IRS to stay abreast of what's going on.
Okay.
Have professional speakers that send us blurbs all the time with new things, interpretations that are coming out. But the new tax law this year is going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What are some of your initial impressions as you're starting to assist people with that whole process?
So for small business, the biggest thing out there is a 20% reduction in business profit that would be taxed. In other words, we'll come up with profit and loss, and once we determine the bottom line, we're going to take 20% of that, subtract it off, and then calculate the tax due. And that's on a very basic level. The computation is really complex. There's
Sure.
a lot of facets to it. But it really makes it interesting. If you're on an S corporation, for example, you must take a salary,
Yes.
but we want the salary to be reasonable.
Yes.
But the salary will reduce your bottom line profit.
Ooh.
If that's reduced, then your 20% reduction is reduced.
Sure.
So as we're going to class, we're trying to find that fine line between a reasonable salary and having enough profit at the bottom line to subtract that 20%.
So you're saying that if I had backed off on salary a little bit this year and kept that bottom line just a little juicier, the 20% deduction, because as an S corp, you're taxed. My individual taxes and my corporation taxes are all rolled into one, correct?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Yeah. This is the fascinating part of the game. I think small business ownership, because it is. You gave the analogy of a puzzle earlier.
Yes,
Playing tax law and like figuring out the sweet spot.
exactly.
It's that's great.
That's what makes it fun. And then doing the what ifs. We have great software. So if a client's in front of me, I can say, well, if we do this, this happens. If we do this, this happens. If you want to plan for next year, let's take a look at this.
Sure.
I know this is probably sick to you guys, but it's fun. I love it.
Oh no, yeah. Well, it's that
Good that it's fun for someone.
exactly.
right.
It's that part of the puzzle, and I will speak to small entrepreneurs here. It's that part of the puzzle though that really makes the huge difference at the end of the day. Everybody goes into owning a small business with a dream, and maybe they have a specialized skill that they bring to the table, but being able to navigate the game. It's
It's
how we
so
refer
important.
to it. It's the game.
Do you want to survive? Do you want to be profitable?
Right.
And how will you know that if you don't do the record keeping and do the due diligent kind of stuff? I mean, if you're a car repair service and it's 5 o'clock and someone comes in and they need a tire changed and now you're going to get home late, the last thing you want to do is record keeping.
Right.
But somehow, if you're going to be successful, you've got to do the time. Hire someone, hire a part-time bookkeeper. We have many people in our community that will do it as an independent contractor. But do it.
Do it. Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it.
What are are there any other new changes to the tax law that will impact small business in a major way?
Oh, there are. There's a temporary new law for 100% deduction of investment for purchasing assets, some buildings, some improvements there. Prior to that, we'd have to do depreciation and maybe write it off over 5, 7, 20 years. And under the new law, most things can be written off immediately if we choose to do that.
Wow.
Another big change is entertainment. And that deduction has been really, it's gone, basically.
Yep.
Business meals are still allowable and they're 50% deductible, but golf outings and country club dues and things like the sporting events, those entertainment type expenses are no longer deductible.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's too bad. The producers of Wisconsin Foodie, they buy season tickets to the Bucks games as an expense because they take people like me to the Bucks game, and the Bucks happen to be doing very well this year, but it's not going to be a tax deductible expense. Sorry, Arthur. Bad news.
So those are the major things. There's a lot of small tweaks in there, of course, but the things that are going to hit small business the hardest are those.
Yeah. Okay.
If I'm looking for more information or like forms, right? Forms seem to be the really daunting part of I got to go through this. I don't know whether to check this. Half the time when we're having new employees, just like how many deductions do you take on your paycheck? There's always question marks. I gotta check. Where's the best place to get the forms that a small business owners specifically need if they haven't budgeted for a tax professional? Do you have any information on that?
Oh gosh, forms are always tricky, especially in this techno world.
Yeah.
You don't really find them at the library or the post office too much anymore. You can go to irs.gov and download a lot of forms there. W-2 forms, 1099s, the annual forms we're filing right now really can't be downloaded because they have to be machine readable at the IRS level. So early on in October, November, we order quite a few forms into our office so that clients and just people in the community can stop by and pick up the forms. There's IRS service centers in La Crosse. They should have forms. but it's not that easy to get them anymore.
Sure.
Well, it also seems like many of the forms are coming out at different times. They're staggered. So depending on what it is that you're doing with your taxes and what form you need, some are available right away and some are slowly becoming available, which is interesting.
You're absolutely right. For our office, we won't even be able to file tax returns until January 28th. And our software company is still waiting for IRS to develop some of the forms and the instructions on how to prepare them.
Why is that? Is that just because things are changing so much that the forms
Are just so complicated. And then meld that with the state rules. Some of the federal changes that we've seen, that 100% depreciation deduction, for example, won't be followed on the state of Wisconsin return. So last year, I think it was last year, we had to wait to file Wisconsin returns till well into March, till
Wow.
Wisconsin got it all figured out for us.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
Yeah.
Just I think the 800-pound gorilla in the room kind of is, currently as this is being recorded, we're in the middle of a government shutdown. And
Yes.
I know that the IRS is one of the branches that's still functioning at some capacity.
Very little.
Yeah. To be fair, I went to pay a tax bill a couple weeks ago. And, I had set aside money end of the year, like, let's get this thing paid. And I couldn't get through to anyone. And IRS.gov just kept linking me to the shutdown page.
Yes.
I couldn't even pay it. But the daily accrual on those penalties
Is still going.
is still going, right?
It
So-
is very frustrating.
Right. How does the shutdown affect someone like you?
It's going to be curious to see how it all turns out.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple things in our office that needed some response,
Yeah.
and we've sent it, we've FedExed responses, but nobody's there to get it. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. This is the first time in my practice experience that we've had this long of a shutdown.
Sure.
It's a little scary.
Yeah. What do you think the backlog is going to look like at the IRS of everything?
I can't even imagine.
Right?
Yeah, I sent in some information before the shutdown, and they sent a letter, gee, we're awful busy. We'll get back to you in 90 days. So same thing. Now the interest and the penalties are accruing if they don't agree with our changes.
Right. Yeah. That sounds horrible. It sounds like it's already kind of an inefficient process. Like, we're waiting to forms for rollout. States have to get on board with the federal, and then we have to figure out how that all works. But then to throw in like, nope, we're going to shut it down.
And in the meantime,
Yeah.
the good news is with the new tax law, if your income is under, I believe, $66,000, you can do IRS free file.
Sure.
Go to the IRS website and file your tax return that way.
Wow.
It's interesting. It should be pretty straightforward, I would think.
Okay.
You can choose a professional. I guess I have not gone on the website, of course, because it's contrary to my business.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But you can free file, and actually, I guess they're processing those returns currently and processing refunds. So
Okay.
that's
Oh,
kind
wow.
of nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's the for a lot of my employees, that's the spark point. Like, if I can't get my tax refund, because I know that a lot of people who, they bank on that tax refund at the end of the year. If that possibility isn't there to get that refund, man, oh man, that's a daunting landscape.
It's hard for the budget for sure.
Yeah.
The new tax forms this year are actually a half a page front and back.
That's incredible.
We'll sign on the front page, and then there's 5 schedules behind that. So it's tax simplification, but I'm not quite sure how it will work.
Right.
But if you're a single person and you have a W-2, I believe it'll be very uncomplicated, streamlined, and will work.
Wow.
The one thing that I'm a little curious about, as the tax rates came down this year, the rate that most of us file under is 15%, and that's gone down to 12%. At the same time, our withholding from our jobs has also decreased. So I think there's a chance that refunds will be smaller this year than we've seen in the past.
Sure.
And of course, we're just getting our own money back.
Yeah.
The IRS has held our money all year, and now we're going to true it up at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And it's possible that we had an extra $20 or $30 in each paycheck all year long, didn't really feel it, and now we're going to expect a really nice refund, and it might not be there. So I'm hoping that isn't the case, but I'm trying to prepare clients for that eventuality.
That is, I mean, I think that is kind of, you hit on something there. The IRS has been holding your money all year long. Now, any of you who are listening who may be an auditor for the IRS, this is not a bad thing. I want to say that out loud, but that is a real thing, right? I mean, when you're checking off those deductions, when you're signing up with a new employer,
Yes,
you're authorizing them to hold your money.
exactly. And how much do you want them to hold?
Right.
And automatically this year they withheld less, and you may not have even noticed it. So it'll be an interesting filing season, and certainly as we prepare returns, we'll look at that and get people to change their withholding if necessary. We have some clients that budget their refund to be a vacation or to pay their real estate taxes or some event. Granted, they're using the IRS as their savings account, but if it works, it works.
Sure.
And so we might want to tweak their withholding this coming year to come in where they would expect.
Yeah. That's good advice. Nora, I've been doing a lot of talking.
Are you
here.
passing it over to me?
No, I just feel like, I sometimes I feel like these things get a little lopsided. It's a lot of my
sometimes
voice.
what happens is I start listening and learning, and then I forget that I'm actually supposed to be helping to co-host this thing. So
I assume that listeners get sick of my voice. So
I don't think that's the case.
Oh, I think you should see some of those email comments.
So, one of the things, this is not one of the questions that we had asked you ahead of time, Joy, but I'm really interested in what some of the tax changes are going to be for families as well. Can you talk about the child deduction and some of the other?
Sure.
Give us the top three.
Sure. She's like,
Good fun stuff.
Yeah,
Give us the top three there, because I think there's some interest for listeners there.
Well, the one thing that has changed is the standard deduction has increased. Last year it was about $6,000 for a single individual. Now it's double. It'll be $12,000. And for a married couple, the standard deduction was $12,000. Now it will be $24,000. The standard deduction is what we can all deduct if we don't itemize. And by itemizing, we mean deducting medical expenses, contributions, mortgage interest, real estate taxes, those types of things. So we can either use the standard deduction or we can itemize. This year, with the increase in the standard deduction, we expect most people are just going to use that and not have to go through the exercise of adding up all their medical, their contributions, digging out their mortgage interest statement, those types of things. The flip side of that is, and that's all good news, the flip side is the personal exemptions have been eliminated. Prior to this, every member of the household, we could deduct about $4,000 off of our taxable income, and that is now gone. So if you have 6 or 7 kids and we lose that $4,000, that actually makes your taxes go up a little bit.
Sure.
But that is offset. For children under age 17, the child credit has been increased from $1,000 to $2,000. And that's an actual credit. That's money that will come right off your tax bill and be refundable. So for families with young children, that's huge. That's going to make a big difference this year.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Nice.
That's a landscape. Hey, I heard something too about people who owed back taxes or like they were accruing penalties. If they had paid 85% of the penalty and back tax by the end of the year this last year, the penalties are forgiven? Is that what it is?
Well, I think, as I understand it, as long as we have 85% of our expected tax paid in, there won't be any penalties or interest. And that goes back to, again, the withholding that was so iffy throughout the year. Our withholding may have gone down and we didn't notice it. So the IRS is giving us a little pass there to say, you know what, we're not going to penalize you as long as you've got 85% of your total liability paid in.
Cool.
So that was kind of nice. That's huge.
That is huge. That is huge.
Yeah, definitely. So another question off of the original list of questions here is there are so many people who have small businesses that are not quite on the level of like the Driftless Cafe or some of the other businesses in the community. You know, maybe they're making
That's saying a lot.
maybe they're making $5,000 or $6,000 extra dollars a year. Are they to be filing their business taxes along with their personal taxes? How do you handle situations like that? Are they filed all together, or is it separate? I think there are going to be people that are really unsure of how the process works, especially when they're doing it the first time.
And that is a really good question. So as a sole proprietor or a new business, and maybe you have just a cottage industry in your home, you are going to file an individual tax return with a Schedule C for small business profit and loss. I like to think of a tax return as a book, and it has many pages to it. And if you have a small business, you're going to add one more page to your book when you file the return. And it will be necessary to know your total income and expense by category to complete that form. The other thing we see in this area a lot are new farmers, people that are trying to do organic vegetables or whatever. And so they are going to file a Schedule F for farming, which is very similar to the Schedule C that I just talked about. Same thing, it's another page in their personal tax return. You have to know all of your income and expenses, of course.
You know, if you are a small business who has only been making a small amount of money each year for several years, how does the IRS look at that? At some point, are you just considered a hobby and not actually a business? And how do people make that distinction?
That is always a really tricky one in my office. Because a hobby, we report the income on page 1 of the tax return, and then the expenses fall over under itemizing. So we try to stay away from hobbies as much as we can. IRS, of course, says if you find $20 on the street, that's income that should be reported on your tax return. So if you're doing a hobby and making money, it should be on your return.
Sure.
The best thing to do, of course, is to move it along, to make it a business, to have a profit motive, business experience, that type of thing, because then you do get the most benefit on your tax return.
I think, you know, some of my neighbors even who are doing small scale farming projects, and maybe they're not making more than $1,000 a year. Is there some sort of minimum or maximum that people have to actually earn in order to be considered a business by the IRS?
Just as a side note, that's a very specific question for your neighbors there. But go ahead. Just an observation.
Well, what figures into this question is Social Security tax.
Sure.
So if you have business profit of $400 or more, you're going to be subject to Social Security tax, which means all that should show up on your tax return.
Okay.
So there really is very low de minimis where you wouldn't have to report it. Practically, you know, I can't say on the air and give advice, but the IRS would want that to show up on your tax return.
All right. Now, I have a question also off the script, and it's kind of a good one to maybe wrap this session on. But, you know, one of the things that I've been asking our guests a lot, and I think it's something that often goes without planning when people are starting a business, and I am guilty of this, getting out, right? How do we wrap it up when it's time to go? And I think one of the things that I have to ask a question about, just for our listeners and the well-being, Joy, what does bankruptcy look like from an accountant's perspective?
Ooh, tough question.
I know.
And I'm very grateful that in my practice, I really haven't gone through that with maybe one or two clients.
Okay, write that down, people.
Yes, and that's that goes back to keep the records, know where you're going, keep your eye on the ball.
Sure.
To unwind bankruptcy is real. It's a nightmare, no doubt, because there's most likely back taxes, maybe payroll taxes, income tax, and it's going to haunt you for a long, long time.
Sure.
I'm definitely not an expert in bankruptcy. I must admit, though, I had a client years ago that came in and said, it's easy to get into business and it's hard to get out.
Indeed.
And that is so very true. as your business progresses, maybe hire someone to work alongside of you that may want to take over your business. Plan out a year or two. What does it look like? What is your exit strategy?
Yeah.
It's not unless you want to just close your doors one day and hope for the best. Again, it takes planning.
Yeah. And I think that is one of the things that I've really tried to evangelize a little bit. Like, getting into business is great and it's fun and exciting, and you carry all the momentum and goodwill of everyone around you who wants to see you succeed. But then strategizing a way out at the end, I'm really telling people to think about, what does it look like to get out? How do you do it?
Absolutely, because as I get those energetic new clients in my office and they're finally not going to have a boss and they'll be able to control their own lives, they will soon find out, no, having your own business is kind of 24/7.
Yep.
Every customer, every client is your boss.
Yeah.
You have responsibility to your employees. And when you go home at night, the clock doesn't shut off.
Right.
2:00 in the morning, you wake up and go, oh my gosh, I forgot this, or how am I going to pay that? Owning your own business is wonderful, but it is also stressful, and it's not for all people. So you do need to plan, if this isn't going to work, what will be your exit strategy?
And do you think, like, from an accounting perspective, when you take that initial meeting, if anyone were to come in to you and say, okay, this is what my business planning is, this is what I'm looking at, this is my accounting software, this is how I'm going to keep track of all this stuff and set up that game plan. What if somebody asks you, like, this is the threshold marker that I want to set and predetermine with you? If this is not making X amount of dollars at the end of the year, then you need to help me visualize a way out of this. Is that a question you'd be comfortable someone bringing to you?
I would certainly want to help them, because hopefully I've worked with them throughout the year. And even going into it, oftentimes we'll say, don't quit your day job. And if you're able to start your business on the side and balance two for a while just to see how it's going to go. But have the attorney and the banker on board with you, so you know that if you've borrowed $10,000 to start the business and in a year it's not going to go, how will that affect your family? Can you pay that back?
Yeah.
What are your responsibilities?
Yeah.
So it's really individualized. You really do need to sit down with your banker, accountant, attorney, and look at the possibilities of unwinding the business.
That's great. That's great advice. Joy, thank you so much for joining us today. This is so informative. And I got to say, like, to make taxes and accounting palatable, you've got it. It's like I said, you have
Right. I agree.
that rich fabric, of personality and, frankly, joy that allows you to solve those puzzles and solve them with levity. And I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Great.
Thanks, Joy.
You've been listening to the 54665, all things rural economic development, all things rural, and all things Viroqua.